Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
What if we continue to be a volatile market? I feel like it's almost every week now this year so far. We've been like, oh man, everything nuked, and then came back, and then we've been in this range from like 98, high 80s to all-time high of $109,000 in Bitcoin for almost 2 months now, sort of just chopping around in there. But let's not talk about all of that. Let's talk about what was this week's panic sell over the weekend. Nothing was open, and a lot of tariff conversation was had by the president.
Yeah, no, essentially Friday afternoon, tariff chatter picked up from the standpoint that they were going to go effective shortly after Friday. And so the market latched onto that, and there was really nothing to trade because a lot of the stuff was kind of around the close of the U.S. session. And so crypto traded heavy this weekend, and then you got to the point where there were a ton of liquidations that happened, particularly in ETH. It saw a move down to, call it roughly 2,100 on the back of some very aggressive liquidations, and that dragged the rest of the crypto complex with it, particularly a lot of alt tokens, and so it was just risk off. There's nothing to trade except crypto over the weekend. Risk off into thin liquidity. And realistically, I think in terms of the positioning of the market, there's a lot of length that was in the market and that still is in the market that is based on the thesis that the administration is going to eventually purchase crypto. They're going to have events and catalysts that will drive crypto prices higher. And so when, the broader market takes a hit based on Trump policy, it gets a little bit more difficult to hold on to those longs. And I think there's just a lot of folks that are a little bit over their skis in terms of just how much length that they've put on, particularly in some of these alts. And so, you had a market where the marginal price that people were willing to pay for tokens was a lot lower, and the market, reacted to that. And markets move at the margin, and so if people got really bearish the market and the price that people are really willing to transact at is like 20% lower, like tokens will move to 20% lower,
Right?
And that's what you've seen.
Yeah, and Bitcoin recovered.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin went all the way down to like 91.7, I think was its bottom wick. The ETH was like a bloodbath.
Yeah.
ETH BTC went down to new like
Fresh
cyclical
trend
lows.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think 0.026 area, well below 0.03 now, and frankly not looking ready to recover yet. Bitcoin though did by Tuesday recover all the way to like almost 102, maybe 102 handle we saw, leading into David Sachs's press conference with the committee chairs from the House and Senate banking, finance, and ag committees. Which we'll talk about in a second. But most of the alts didn't have that same recovery. And so as a result, you've seen ETH BTC stay lower. You've seen Bitcoin dominance at basically like
Bull market highs type of thing.
I mean, almost like the highest that it's ever been in a bull market. It's 61.2%. A couple of crosses like Sol ETH, which is like when that goes up, that means Sol is gaining ground on ETH, whereas it's the reverse with the Bitcoin cross, doesn't really matter. That's fresh highs or trend highs, but yeah, most of the alts did not recover at all the way Bitcoin did. Does that tell us the same thing? We were talking a lot about this last week.
Yeah, I think one, it's a function of supply and demand, and there's a ton of supply in these tokens, whether it's from vesting, from inflation schedules, from folks that are on teams trying to sell some tokens. And
meme coin explosion.
Demand is really there for new tokens at low market caps, and not there as much for more established tokens, especially ones that are like relatively large. And so, when there's more supply than demand, like prices need to move lower. And I think it's totally reasonable what happened because, I like every day I've been doing this exercise. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. But I go home and I ask Perplexity, like, what are the companies worth $30 billion? What are the companies worth $100 billion? What are the companies worth $10 billion? And you look at them and you're like, wow, these are like industrial juggernauts that have been around for decades that produce, you know, literally like $1 billion in revenue per year,
and really
et cetera.
important things.
Yeah, that also have optimistic futures with deregulation and things of that nature, and AI, blah, blah, blah. And so when you compare that to these tokens that, you know, don't necessarily have that outlook, it's really hard to justify some of the valuations. Now, again, I'm a believer that, you know, market dynamics are the most important. And so, you know, I think that's left people a little bit more cautious, I would say, about, you know, purchasing some tokens at really large valuations. And, you know, that's kind of what's playing out in the market. And as far as I know, none of this supply is slowing down. People are still launching like thousands, if not millions of memes every day. There's still a ton of inflation in lots of protocols. And every day, like, it's like a new ETP provider filing for,
which will be more supply,
you know, a levered ETF or a different token ETF or, you know, et cetera. And so it really is, there's just too much going on.
Please, sir, no more,
for the
sir.
amount of people that are interested in buying some of these assets.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm not shocked. And, you know, back to what we said last week, it's like the protocols you want to engage with and invest in are the ones that are seeing real adoption, real growth, you know, new stable coins, you know, new use cases, that, you know, have a strong team behind them. And you want to kind of avoid the stuff that is showing less traction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about David Sachs's press conference.
Absolutely.
Before we because this was the sort of crypto market event on Tuesday. We're recording Wednesday, February 5th, but on Tuesday, February 4th, yesterday, the White House's crypto and AI czar, David Sachs, went to the Senate to give a statement in a live press conference with the chairs of the four most important committees for crypto regulation. That's the House Financial Services Committee and the House Agriculture Committee, which oversee the SEC and CFTC respectively, and then the Senate Banking Committee and the Senate Ag Committee, which in the Senate oversee the SEC and CFTC respectively. So it was a bicameral, both houses of chambers of Congress. It was also a multi-committee.
Is it cameral or cambrial?
I think it's camera. I'm not sure.
All good.
Look that up for us, Phineas. So both houses, both jurisdictional committees, and also both branches of government, with David Sachs representing the White House. And it was a press conference about how they're going to work really hard and together to make America the digital golden age of crypto. But Bitcoin, using that as a proxy, went all the way up to almost 102 leading into it, but then sold off back into the 97 range where we basically are now. Did they think that David Sachs was going to say the Pledge of Allegiance with his hand on the Satoshi White Paper?
Again, it's just crypto just always trades like buy the rumor, sell the news. And, you know, no matter what he said during that, like, I would have bet that crypto was going to go down after.
Yeah.
Because, you know, but ignoring the short-term price action, I do think the imagery alone is notable.
I think it was historic even.
You know, you've got a czar, crypto czar, meeting with some of the most important committee chairs, bicameral, like, et cetera. Like, that's a big deal. The stuff Hester Pierce put out, that's a big deal. The FDIC announcement about, you know, allowing banks to do more crypto activity, that's a big deal. SAB 121, that's a big deal. So you're getting a lot of good things out of this administration, and you're getting it really quickly.
Yeah.
And I would say that the tone that David Sachs took with respect to the strategic stockpile or the sovereign wealth fund and Bitcoin, like, he didn't dismiss it. And you know that
I think this was maybe the most interesting for the market, although it still, of course, was a sell the news kind of thing. He didn't say national digital asset stockpile only, which is the language in the executive order that a lot of people hoping for something more or something more Bitcoin specific had wanted. He was very clear. he said we will look at a Bitcoin reserve or
Yes.
digital asset stockpile, the potential creation. So they're evaluating, by the way, did not commit to either.
Yeah.
And then later he went on CNBC like 2 hours later, it said the exact same thing, Bitcoin reserve or digital asset stockpile.
Yeah, and
He's very clearly signaling to the industry. He knows that the industry knows that those are sort of two distinct ideas. And he's saying they're both on the table.
No, and I would put a pretty high delta of Bitcoin going on the U.S. government's balance sheet in a more aggressive way at some point this year.
Yeah.
Right? Howard Lutnick is the guy in charge of the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
By the way, it was in response to that question with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But and that was the first part of his answer to the question was actually, would they put it in the Sovereign Wealth Fund?
Yes.
And he said, I don't know. You're going to have to ask Howard Lutnick about that.
Yeah, and yes, correct.
And if you go back and watch Howard Lutnick talk about Bitcoin, I mean, I'm just saying, it seems like he really, really likes it.
I mean, this is the same administration who launched a meme token. Like they will literally.
They're pro crypto.
They're very pro crypto.
Yeah.
And you know, the language I've heard from Scott Bessent around Bitcoin as well is not concerning in any way. Like he thinks that, you know, Bitcoin doing well promotes wealth creation in the younger generation, and he sees it as like a reasonable thing to support.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that the administration, like I'd put a very high delta on them actually putting Bitcoin in the Sovereign Wealth Fund or making like meaningful change to, you know, the government's Bitcoin policy. And that is incredibly bullish in the long run. And so it's really hard to separate like these short-term market fluctuations from the ultimate state of what the U.S. government's policy stance is going to be with Bitcoin, which seems like it's going to be incredibly bullish. Yeah, and so, you know, while we are dealing with a lot of volatility and that generally is not comfortable, I do think that this volatility presents an opportunity to accumulate more at good levels. And so I think for you know, my outlook, near-term outlook, Bitcoin's still a range trade, you know, call it 90K to 108. And, you know, at the bottom end of that range, you're probably meant to buy because I do not see this administration, like, not being aggressive with their Bitcoin policy. And I think you just have to kind of time it because, you know, the Sovereign Wealth Fund assessment is going to take 120 days for them to come up with recommendations, right?
Yeah, we don't get that report until July.
Correct. And then David Sachs's thing is...
Oh, sorry, the David Sachs thing we don't get till July.
And yeah, that's
180 days. You're right.
Yeah, I think it's 90 versus 120, but
yeah,
whatever it may be, like you will get like substantive like policy recommendations that are going to be pro-crypto. And like, I don't see why the administration wouldn't do it. Like, they're trying to abolish the Department of Education right now. Like, they're doing so many things that may seem unconventional, but to me, it just highlights their capacity and willingness to push boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think crypto is a place where they will continue to do that.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm bullish Bitcoin,
time.
but you know, with the rest of crypto, I'm a little bit more cautious. I think, you know, I'm much more comfortable being in Bitcoin than any other asset.
There you go. My friend, Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.